My name's Bill Searle. I'm the Manager of Learning Technologies at Charles Darwin University. So I worked with a team of staff on our whole SAS migration. And I'm just going to really call out a couple of key points regarding our SAS migration, just show a screenshot of what our environment looks like after the SAS migration, and Schelly's going to do the same. But then we'd really like to open it up for general conversation and questions. Roger's also here from Southern Cross, and he'll talk about some of their experiences with the change from the snapshot controller to the SIS framework as well. So we started talking about SAS in around about, I reckon, October, November last year. And then the university signalled the intent to migrate to SAS in March this year. So we had a pretty rapid timeline, and our first kick-off calls with Angelo from Managed Hosting was one of the first things we identified was it was a very short time frame to get there. So we actually provisioned our test migration server on the 24th of April. So it was really only about 6 weeks later that we had the test migration environment up. It took 25 hours for our migration server to be cloned and all the data to be copied across from our managed hosting environment. We kept the test migration server up for a period of 3 months. And then our UAT approach is, I don't know about other institutions, but we do a ridiculously comprehensive UAT. We have a team of 8 staff, and each of those 8 staff really spend a hell of a lot of time doing a whole bunch of scenario-based or role-based user acceptance testing. So from the student perspective and then also from the staff or lecturer perspective as well. And that took around about 10 working days for the UAT to be completed for our context. And then our production migration also only took 25 hours. And at the time, we were sort of thinking, well, the test migration was 25 hours. What's the chances of them coming in around about the same time? And they actually came in around about the same time. We made a conscious decision at our institution to have a live migration window of 4 days. So our environment came down on Friday evening at 8 p.m. We actually had the environment handed off to us Saturday evening, but we made a conscious decision that we would keep the environment unavailable to the academic and student community till the following Wednesday morning. And we did that for a number of reasons. One is it gave us a bit of breathing space. So it really gave the team the opportunity to sort of do any user acceptance and testing post-migration, but it also gave us that sort of, I suppose, a bit of a safety net so that we were able to escalate any tickets back up to Blackboard for any issues that we may have observed in the environment. And we're also able to sort of close our help desk, which was an absolute relief, because it's something that you would typically not do. But because we took that 4-day window and we promoted it to the academic community, it gave us that sort of time to sit back, not take those calls from people. And I mean, let's face it, they couldn't log into the LMS anyway. So it gave us the opportunity to sit back a little bit, take a bit of a breather, and also reward the staff that were involved in the project as well. So unlike Schelly's context, our SAS deployment is a FDO or flexible deployment option. So we opted to do that for a number of reasons. I think one of the main drivers for us to go to FDO is that we've been typically in that annual upgrade cycle, just like probably a lot of other institutions are in that managed hosting or self-hosted context. So we were used to that annual process, and we were really mindful of the change that we would need to implement as an institution in terms of change management, communications, supportability of moving into a continuous delivery option. So we opted to do the FDO, but we're now rethinking that, because we've been in that environment for a while. Let's see what happens there. Oh, nothing. Okay. So some of our key lessons. So I will call out that there were some misunderstandings and some miscommunication around the flexible deployment option. So when we first started talking to Blackboard around our SAS migration, which was in the previous year, so it was in October last year, the model for FDO was very different to what the model was that we went to at the beginning of this year. So at that time of the year, the conversations were, as a client, we could choose which upgrade we would go to. So instead of going to Q2 2018, we were thinking that we would go to Q4 2017, so take a bit more of a conservative approach. And then we also were told at the time that we had a bit of a choice around the upgrade timing in terms of the release cadences as well. The kickoff call, bang, first surprise. So the first surprise was you can't choose which upgrade you're going to. You need to go to Q2 2018 because that's the cycle that they were in. And then the other surprise was we get 3 options or 3 windows for updates twice a year, Q2 and Q4. I mean, we got over that pretty quickly, but the initial, surprise was, oh, shit, what are we going to do? How do we manage that in terms of our communications and in terms of our help and support? But, we sort of got over that quite quickly. We also had, just in terms of our the project planning, and really this was something that, so the way that we worked on the project plan is that Blackboard developed an overall project plan that you signed off on a project charter, but we had some issues with the currency of the project plan. So instead of the project plan being viewable on a day-to-day basis and being updated on a day-to-day basis for us to maintain where the project was in the cycle, we were sort of getting that weekly. So it was a lesson that we've learnt from, and we've also been talking to Blackboard about that going forward, just to ensure that you're on the same page in terms of the currency of the project plan as well. We did have some issues concerning the move to AWS around firewall rules and internet authentication. So at our institution, when you log onto the internet, you are forced to authenticate. And then you go through the firewall, and then you've got access to the World Wide Web. So with managed hosting, we were able to do that because there was a determined IP address range. As soon as you go into AWS, you do not have that luxury. You've got a huge IP address range that you need to permit through your firewalls. So we had to do a lot of work to change the way in which we authenticated to the internet. So essentially, we've removed the firewall rules that now force an authentication when you go outside the university context. That was our only way around it. The IT department could not manage the dynamic IP address ranges that are in the Amazon Web Services context, because those IP address ranges are quite exhaustive, and also as another environment comes up as well, you have to then permit those. So we decided to change our authentication option to actually force all staff on campus and all students on campus to authenticate first. I must say that 75% of our higher education students study 100% online off campus. So it would only affect any of those users who are actually studying on campus. We had some subtle differences, and I'm sure, Schelly, you may have the same. When you're looking at your test migration environment versus the production environment after the upgrade. And the major impact we had was around language pack. I mean, like most of us here, we probably have language pack customizations in terms of your context. We call a course a unit, etc., etc. We have some customized learning analytics reports that are named appropriately for our context as well. What we were finding is after the upgrade is you'd log on to server A and it would be US language. You log on to server B and it would be Australian language. So essentially the customizations were not populating through the nodes that were in the environments. So we worked with Blackboard, and essentially what was happening was they had to reboot services fairly constantly for a period of time in order for those language pack changes to propagate through all the environments. And what I have asked them is what happens when another node spins up in the future? Will you need to continue to do that in order for those language pack changes to populate through all the different environments in the AWS context? But I believe there's also a language pack change coming in the future. Mick, that there's been some conversation about that as well, I believe. Anyway, the other one, and I'm sure Schelly and Roger, you probably have the same, is production clones onto staging. So we had a lot of issues with production clones on the staging because essentially it's a clone of the production environment put onto the staging environment in an AWS context, which is now scripted. And that, so all your integrations, LTI, custom B2s, safe assign, all those little quirky integrations that you have in a production environment are mirrored in the staging environment. So luckily we had a very supportive SDM that was on a different time zone to us. They woke up in the early hours of the morning, ensured that all those configurations were disabled so that it wouldn't have an impact in the production environment. But it's just something to be aware of, and it's something that we've raised as well to see if going forward there could be some customizations to those scripts. And I just wanted to add that the 4-day migration window for us really proved incredibly valuable because it just gave us that breathing room and that extra space. So if you are looking at doing a SAS migration and you're timing it over a weekend, I would encourage you to do something the same. It was just really proved very valuable for us. And Shelley said that she wanted some sort of screenshot of what our environment looked like post-upgrade. So look, in terms of, we've adopted the Learn 2016 theme, but we have not really heavily customised it at all, because we actually introduced the monochrome theme in the previous release that we did in the November summer semester. So we actually have stuck to that theme. And the reason why we're stuck to that theme is it also introduces the whole concept of the monochrome theme when you're moving into an ultra context as well. So we really haven't done a lot of customization to the theme. We've really kept it quite minimal. Thank you.
We had a pretty good experience. We had a pretty good experience, and we didn't take the time that Bill had. We literally closed down on Friday night, and we were back up by noon Saturday. And I did the testing as we were alive, you know, as we went live, because we do like to live on the edge a little bit. And we had a lot of the same experience. We had a lot of the same experiences, including the language pack, which is still not resolved for us. And I have some ideas about that I was going to talk to Andrew about later. Let's see. So our migration and the restoration of production database to the new system was the second step. The project charter was the first, and the project charter was very, very important to us. And unlike you, we had access to that all the time because it was on our OneDrive. We had a shared OneDrive with Andrew and his team. And so Philip had that, so we were able to access those documents and update those documents constantly. We had an issue with the SSL certificates because they changed, and we had people in our team that really didn't want to give that up, and we had quite a fight about that. And we had to go that way because basically they said, this is the way it is, this is how it works, this is what you're going to have to get used to. So if your people are going to have a problem with that, you might want to prepare them for it now because it's not going to change. We had some issues with none of our third-party B2s had any problems. Everything just copied over just beautifully. One of the things we had a problem with is that when they cloned the environment into what became our staging server, they actually duplicated the building blocks. So we have duplicates of many, and if not most of our building blocks, which we will be cleaning up later. It doesn't cause any problems at all. But we did have problems with syncing we were with EasySoft, and we have been for a while, and we did have problems with EasySoft because of that problem where we had the identical URL for the production and the staging environment. And they have since updated their building block to prevent that from ever happening again. So if anybody's using EasySoft, you won't have to worry about that as long as you're with the latest building block. Okay. Like I said, our live migration, it took 31 hours, and there was a little bit of a delay partially because of these building blocks and the miscommunication because they kept asking us for copies of the building blocks, and I had already provided them because we'd done this once in the staging environment, so they had all the building blocks, but yet they were coming back and asking for more building blocks, and those were the ones that ended up being duplicates. So they didn't need to do that, so don't do that. Okay. Okay, can you hit the next slide? Okay. Small heart attacks and heartaches. That's the hiccups with the B2s. We did have a problem with the cloud as well. And one of the things that happened when we first brought it up is that, and it seems to happen with most of our upgrades in the past, that the cloud services are turned off. And you have to make sure you turn those things back on. And there's a lot of the little things that change. Permissions change. We got very surprised by the fact that we'd gone from Q4 2016 to Q2 2018 without ever really having much experience with the platform itself, hadn't seen it much. And we found that there was a configuration issue, a system configuration thing that we had never seen before because we had never had it on our version. So if you haven't seen the system configuration, this is where you set up your email replies for everything that goes in this email digests. So our email replies were coming out from, what was it? SCU, I can't even read that. Oh, SCU Live Mig.blackboard.com. And that caused a lot of problems for our people. They either lost the emails, they went to their spam filters, or they just deleted them. They didn't even read them, so that caused a problem. But the URL in the managed hosting was changed to a temporary URL too early, which caused our login page to fail and disappear. And there was a time when there was a mismatch with the SSL certificates where students were getting a message that actually basically said that they were coming to us and saying, have we been hacked? It looked like we'd been hacked. So that has been addressed by the final follow-up with everything, and I don't think it's going to happen ever again for anybody else. So we actually kind of took the bullet for everybody on that one.
So did you guys put up a custom splash page?
Yes, we did.
And did you host that yourself, or did you host it in the
We had it hosted ourselves.
Yeah, okay. Because we did the opposite. We actually had a custom splash page that was hosted in the Blackboard context, so we didn't have that same experience that Schelly was describing.
And I wish we had done the same thing. But, okay. And
these guys went 2 weeks before us, so we learned a few lessons.
Yes. I did. When we had the issues with the language packs, that was one of the first things I wanted to tell you, because the language pack was a big issue for us, and it still is, because we're with the continuous delivery option, and we decided to go with that primarily because we've seen from reading the release notes that 90% of the fixes that they're putting into the system for these things is for Ultra, and we're on Classic, or we're on Original, so we don't really have to worry about much. So the testing that we have to do is a lot less than what we would have done normally. And basically what I do is I go through all of the release notes and I look at all of the known issues, and I find the ones that affect us by the version that we're on and just forget about the rest of them. So the testing is not as bad as I thought it was going to be, and we don't spend that much time on it, which is really good. So I'm very happy with going with the continuous delivery option, and I would recommend it to anybody because the changes are so small, and most of them are just fixes. They're mostly just fixes and very few enhancements. And the enhancements, you'll have time to let your people know about them. And if it's just fixing things, then it's just fixing things. It's been effortless. Okay. And the next thing, if you can. This is our new theme. So it's been heavily customized. We're using this scales down perfectly on any device, all the way from the login to the other. So if you just hit the next one. This is our student landing page. And as you can see, we have Studiosity like you do too, and a couple of other things. And we're in the process of doing a new 2.0 landing page for MySU Hub that's along the lines of what Griffith has done with their hub. So we're looking at doing that now. And this is an example of a learning site. So all the learning sites now are exactly the same. They all have the same color scheme, and they cannot be changed. So no one can use any styles. They can't change the buttons. They can't change anything. And we were really concerned because academics really love to do that. And we found out that not a single person has complained about it, because the way we told them about it was that it was for accessibility purposes, and because it was going to work on every mobile device, and not a single person could complain because it's a perfect reason for doing it.
I mean, it's interesting. We had some issues with that because the previous release that we were on, the ability to customize style was actually locked down because it was a monochrome theme. Q2 2018 brought back the ability for an academic to change the styles of the menu colour. So what we ended up doing is, like, we had two options. We had an option to try and fix it in the theme ourselves, or we had the option to manually go in and change all the colour schemes for all the units. We decided to do that. And once we've done it once, because of course copy, we don't have to do it again. But of course an academic could come across that in customisation and change the colour scheme back. But you can actually modify the permissions and remove that ability as well. As long as you leave some of the permissions available, like change the landing page, etc. But you can modify the permissions on the role to remove that ability.
Yeah, we've just turned off the styles altogether, so they can't do it. And you'll notice
So do you control the landing page, or do you give the teacher the ability to control the landing page?
No, everyone can control the landing page, but it's always going to start at the announcements, but very few people change that.
We have staff that use a module page as a landing page, or choose to have the announcements as the landing page. And we allow them to have that flexibility.
Oh, we do too, but very few people actually change it.
Okay.
It usually stays that way. And that one, this is an accessibility module that we put on there called Census Access. I just wanted to alert people to this. It's a pretty neat tool that allows a student to upload a file and make it accessible. So we've created a sub-tab for that for all students and staff to have access to Census Access. That's it.
All right, we've got 5 minutes. There's actually hoping to be more of a conversation. Sorry about that. So, look, more than happy to take any questions. We've got 5. Yes, sir.
2 questions. The size of your installations, I'm assuming that's a factor in terms of...
The migration time? Yeah, so we were about 1.8 terabyte or thereabouts.
The whole entire environment?
Yeah.
What size, Andrew?
What size are we?
I'm asking Andrew. Very similar? So what size are you?
Is that the whole entire...
That's the content and the DB. Yeah. Yeah. It's going to take a bit longer then, isn't it? But I mean, one of the things that we did, Gordon, as well, is that we went through an archiving regime before we did the SAS migration.
Yeah, we've done the same.
Yeah.
We've moved over to a more relevant process.
Yep.
Which makes our archiving a lot easier to do. So we can actually archive via terms, which makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
The second question I have with regards to locking down the theme, when you actually want to transition to Ultra,
Yep.
how do you think that, obviously initially it's going to be a lot easier because there's not as much customization and options that we can see currently. Don't you think that might be more difficult to transition to Ultra?
But the theme that we've chosen is more an Ultra style because it's a monochrome theme.
Right.
So
Still be changed though.
Not the overall theme, but only the unit navigation could be changed. So a teacher could go in and change the background colour to the unit nav, but not the actual theme for the entire environment. So what we would, our thoughts around transition to Ultra is probably very similar to what probably people are thinking, and what we'll hear more about over the next couple of days is that we would look at going base nav first, maintain 9.1, and then slowly look at ultrafine courses. And then if you enable base nav anyway, you've got a monochrome theme straight up in terms of the base navigation, and then it ensures some consistency to the scheme in the 9.1 as well. The other thing I was going to say is as part of the SAS migration is you have to do, they also go through to look at the legacy content that's sitting in database as well, and any legacy content that's sitting in the system. Yeah. So that's part, and they'll give you a report around the legacy content that's sitting in the system as well. So that's an opportunity to look at any of the legacy items that are hanging around from previous Learn releases, etc., or hidden in the hidden file system. So that all gets cleaned up before you do the migration.
And what's the impact of that having that removed?
Well, for us there wasn't any because it was really old material. And essentially we've been sort of encouraging the academic community to store the bulk of their content either in the content collection, but we no longer store any rich media in the content collection. We have a dedicated streaming environment for rich media now as well.
So we don't have the content system.
Ah.
And I guess one of the benefits out of going to SAS is that you have to adopt the content system.
Yeah.
So that's a benefit, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's a whole new ballgame.
Well, yeah, exactly. You guys will need to wrap your heads around the content system and the permissions and everything around that as well. But, I mean, there are some advantages of going to the content system because not only do you get individual unit course level collections, but you have institutional collections that you can maintain and establish as well.
Yeah.
I just want to mention about the SIS Framework Controller. Does anybody use that?
Yes, partially.
Partially? Yeah, Roger's got some stuff about that.
Yeah, I know we're short of time, so very, very quickly. With the SIS framework, similar to what Bill was saying in regards to the clones, you've got another environment that's got exactly the same settings as what you've got in production for your SIS integration. And a number of times I've had emails saying no files processed. Well, our files are automatically put into the pickup directory, so we're not being alerted that that's not happening, so the files were there. So one of the theories, and I ran this past Andrew, Angelo, and Flavio, and both of them have deemed it as plausible that you've got another system out there that's actually stealing your files. Now, I have another little theory in regards to these rolling restarts that they have, because it's now no longer a rolling restart, it's actually a redeployment of new servers. And then once the new servers are up, then they automatically switch over. So if you're installing a B2, you get a new B2 on the freshly installed servers, and then they switch over. So at one instance, there's two sorts of systems in the play. So again, is something stealing your files? So that's something that Bill and I will be talking to Wade about later, sometime over the next couple of days.
The length of time it's taken to process?
So yeah, we had some issues just when we migrated from snapshot controller to SIS Framework Controller. We initially were doing 5 feeds a day. But what we found was those feeds were getting to a point where they were getting, when we moved to the framework, we had to drop it down to 4 feeds per day because we noticed an increase in the load time that it actually took for those feed files to process. So instead of us promoting to the students that they would get access the same day, we've changed our process to say that within 24 hours you would get access to the
We moved fully to rest.
Yeah, I know that we're out of time, so we're happy to take this offline later if anyone wants to catch up with us later.
Can I just ask one quick?
Sure.
I know Glenn's here and as well. So there's a lot of lessons learned just from these two years.
Yep.
I think there was how many hundreds of people going to SAS and whatever. So can you tell us about how Blackboard's collating this information and creating some sort of, what's it, knowledge base? How do you actually go, all right, we think you won't be affected by that one, that one, and that one. Might get hurt by that one, and then resolving that. Is that?
Yeah, sure.
More importantly, the thing is these sort of building blocks or custom building blocks that are actually out there that are not compatible. And we have a collection of those building blocks where they get shared so that they are.
Maybe that could be a presentation.
Yeah, it could be. We do have a virtual SAS group that meets twice a month, and we discuss a lot of this in them. But yeah, on community.blackboard.com, there's the invite on there, so you'll be able to find it. So yeah, thank you everyone.